Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Once Upon a Time. Another fantastic episode. In this episode, we kind of got to learn about Tiana's past, like beyond, before her even joining up with Cinderella, before like Tiana even started the whole resistance thing. We kind of learned how she got to where she was. So in this, we end up finding out more about her story in a sense of like her kingdom is in trouble because everyone's being heavily taxed, which is kind of interesting. I guess because prior to this, I was like, I forget that like Once Upon a Time does do its own thing with certain stories. Like, because I looked at Frozen and I was like, because in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, Frozen, they like made it kind of like a direct sequel. But it's like, no, in this case, it's like they kind of do what they typically do with some storylines, and that's change things up. Like, for example, like Peter Pan in the show is very different from the Peter Pan that you're typically used to from like the animated, movie. So I had to remember, like, right, they do changes too, because in this one, she actually comes from royalty, whereas in the animated movie from a couple years back, which it has been a couple years since I've seen it. I think if I remember correctly, she was a maid that came to like a ball or a costume party or whatever. But nevertheless, in this version, she's a princess. Her kingdom's in trouble. Interesting enough, her mom, played by Robin Givens, who most recently plays the mayor on Riverdale, so that's cool. But obviously, like, so much. She's done so much stuff over the years. Just that. Robin Givens is amazing. Nevertheless, in this regard, it's like Tiana's kind of gotten in her head like, oh, I need to like find a wealthy prince to kind of help with things. And I also appreciate that little moment where Giselle pops up and is kind of snooty and kind of being a jerk, like asshole, because she's just like, oh, your father's metal. It's like, oh, too bad your dad's not around to protect you or something. It's like, which is like super sucky. I mean, we actually think about it, it's like, where's your dad in your whole situation? So I was like, you're making fun of someone. Like, that's so messed up. Just kind of just being there just to be smug is like, ugh. Which we'll be definitely diving into Giselle later on Giselle / Ivy later on in this episode. But in this regard, she ends up crossing paths with Dr. Facilier, which isn't too much of a surprise considering he's the main antagonist of Princess and the Frog, which someone already told me he's going to possibly popping up, which is like makes sense considering it's Tiana's in this. But nevertheless, I do appreciate how the story got twisted around in this one, where it's like, it's not where Tiana ultimately finds some prince. She ends up finding a prince, but really he's not really a prince. He's someone that was forced into like trying to steal that from that, ruby, what's it called? Like a firefly metal that, Tiana's, father had acquired for being the hero that he was. But obviously, the story of like, oh, she's a princess and she meets a prince and he's a frog and everything. It's like, they did a complete twist on this story, because I love the reveal at the end of like, no, actually, he actually has a true love that he's trying to save, but it's not because he's trying to turn her back into a human. He's trying to turn himself back into a frog. So I was like, did not see that coming. I was wondering how that whole situation was going to work, considering the whole fact of the matter is, I was like, oh, he's not supposed to be Tiana's true love because he already has a true love. I was like, that's kind of interesting. I mean, because ultimately Tiana's whole situation was teaching her like basically like she doesn't need like some prince or hero to come save the day. It's like, nah, I can be the hero, which is like, yeah, people like Snow is a prime example of like, you don't need someone to be a hero. Like, look at Snow, she's like a super badass, like she's good at archery and just fighting in general, and she's good at trekking. Like, she's a badass, and that was before she even met David, So the whole story was basically her to find the hero in herself. Though, sadly, her story did end up leading to her basically helping Facilier kind of break out. Because it seems like he's, interestingly enough, was trapped between two worlds. One foot in this world and one foot, I guess, in the realm of the dead, or, But now, because of the ruby, he has been set free. So that's the end of him in this part of Tiana's story. Doesn't mean he won't pop up later on. I don't know, maybe he'll pop up at some, like, when it's all said and done, he might pop up like, I mean, because there's currently no magic in this world in Hyperion Heights, so I can only assume like he's going to pull Rumple, and the moment like everything, the curse is broken, he'll pop up and like, oh, I got my magic again. But I mean, who's to say like him and Tiana didn't cross paths even more? Like, I mean, that was a long time ago, because let's not forget, this is even before Lucy was born, so there's a good couple of years in between that of story that needs to be filled in. I mean, it's much like the previous seasons of like, there's so much story that they can break it down over the course of the seasons of learning new things and new connections between characters. But that was that. it ties into, well, her name under the curse is Sabine. She's making beignets as a way to compensate for the fact is that Victoria is increasing their rent and stuff like that. Just because like Victoria has stepped up her ways of trying to break Lucy's like belief, like, and it was kind of an interesting thing because this, and it kind of shows you who Tiana is too, where like when she kind of has her mindset on something, she kind of go all in or nothing. Like she kind of like, she's almost like a gambling type a little bit, not in a bad sense. The fact of the matter is, if she's got like a goal in mind, she's going to give her all. She's going to put everything in it. In this case, her and Jacinda's rent. That it had stashed up to now, which Jacinda was kind of against, but everything, Tiana saying like, which is kind of interesting when you think about the fact is Tiana kind of got Jacinda like into the resistance, and now she's like getting her into this. I guess that's also supposed to be like the reflection of that too. But everything was going well until Victoria had the place burned down, which sucks, by a guy named Ralph too. So I mean, it just seemed like an insignificant thing, but I'm sure that's going to turn into something later on. Just because we never actually got to see who he was, but we just know the name Ralph. Which ultimately that whole situation was, quickly side note, I do appreciate that the symbol Lucy was going to choose for them is the firefly symbol, because it was always what Tiana wished upon. Which I'm curious to see if that kind of plays a role in Tiana's story. It seems like it doesn't. Like it looks like it's a nod towards it. Because I forgot the firefly's name in Princess and the Frog, which is like, man, that's a super bummer movie. When like, now I'm remembering, I was like, right, because spoiler alert, he died. That kind of like, I was like, right. I guess that's it's just because it's interesting to me, because it's like they could have introduced a character like that. Because let's not forget Jiminy Cricket's a thing. But at the same time, I'm like, what the fact of the matter is, because this isn't supposed to be an exact adaptation of Tiana's story from that. It's kind of like Once Upon a Time's own version. I guess maybe you could argue that because there's like kind of a multiverse on Once Upon a Time, there's another Tiana out there that's much like that Tiana. Just like maybe there's a different version of Elsa out there. Like the Elsa we know is the one that's connected to the Disney world, but this is kind of like a different Tiana. Like much like this is a different Cinderella. Like I said, the whole multiverse thing, which is like, it's still so cool that there's like a multiverse in like this Disney universe like that. I mean, guys, it's not like that's the first time that's ever happened. I guess arguably you could say Kingdom Hearts did that first. I mean, I'm sure there's probably stuff predating it, but like Kingdom Hearts is my first example of like a Disney multiverse, where that's Final Fantasy meets Disney and all these different worlds kind of in the same, well, overall world, but there's all these different, Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts is Kingdom Hearts. I'm going all over the place, so I do apologize. But it seemed like things were kind of working in Victoria's favor when it seemed like everything kind of broke down, because it's like Jacinda and Tiana were kind of at odds, because for her it's like, you live so much in a fantasy, like you put it all on the line. I have a daughter to take care of, like I'm already in a bad enough situation with money, and now my situation with my daughter, and you're just compromising that. It's like, it's fine and dandy to live, like dream big, have these fantasies, but you swept me up in it, and you made me believe, you had me false hope just to kind of have it all ripped away, and I actually thought that was going to be the end of that, dude. I was like, man, that sucks. Because even Lucy tried to keep her to stay, but it's like, Tiana was kind of like, there's just some battles you can't win, that you can't, there's just some things you can't fight. And it's just like, even herself like being like, oh, sometimes you just have to grow up, and I mean, and I think that's kind of a big part of this too. And it kind of reflects in just, not just Lucy, but also in Henry too, of like, when you believe so strongly, like it doesn't matter, like, because it's something that we get as adults is we lose the ability to believe, and that's something they've kind of like tackled a little bit throughout the show too. Like, what was it? Was that, there was a part, I want to say that was season 6, maybe, where that whole situation where Henry was able to temporarily make everyone in the crowd believe. It didn't last long, but it was enough to make them believe, just because it's like people have a tendency to just let that side of them go. And it seemed like Tiana was about to let that go. But luckily, Lucy kind of talked to Jacinda, and she kind of realized, like, no, every time like the world's kind of beat me down, you were always there to pep me up. And I kind of forget that sometimes maybe you need that pep talk too. So like, to be there for each other, be, their best friends, and not letting this one setback stop them. So to the point they get like a food truck, because they're going to go selling the beignets, have their own plans for it and everything, which I love hearing their plans about, like getting like jazz and just making it this whole awesome thing. So kind of like a middle finger to Victoria, because it's like, haha, you tried but failed, because things aren't going to break that easily. Because the whole point was like trying to uproot. It's like you're trying to cut at Lucy's beliefs. Like it's like comparing it to a tree. It's like you've been cutting at the limbs. You need to be cutting the tree at the roots, is what the lady she has locked up was telling Victoria. So. But what I also appreciate in this episode and everything too is the fact is that the whole Ivy and Henry situation, because obviously her mom is becoming more and more of a piece of crap towards her. Just like maybe you should learn your place, kind of know points when to shut up, basically. Or like, it's like, oh, I thought this was kind of a job for my daughter, but it's like maybe I can have to find someone else who's much better at it. Just constantly putting her daughter down to the point she tries to rope Henry in, and Henry's like, oh yeah, Ivy wants to help, which Ronnie's not buying. She's like, I don't believe that, so she's like, don't be so quick to believe her. It's like, oh, you're having feelings for her. It's like, don't waste your time. Go be with Jacinda. I love her playing matchmaker and everything, and him being like, you can stop trying to like mother me. You're not my mom. And she's like, well, if I was your mom, it's just like, it's so good. But I love that she does go all overprotective and stuff like that. And she's like, okay, to a certain degree, it's kind of what I brought up before. It's like now, like Henry was journeying on his own for a while, but now it's like Regina's with him, like in the past, in the other realm, before the curse and everything. So it's just kind of interesting. I was like, oh, what would it be like to have your mother with you 24/7 on adventures and stuff like that? It's got to be interesting. But in this regard, well, it's actually even more interesting too, because when you actually break it down, like, Regina and Jacinda kind of bond anyway, so on a level she already likes Jacinda. Like, I mean, because that's something we still never really get to see, because like the fact of the matter is, like, that means Regina's a grandmother. I didn't even think about that to an aspect. Like, I don't know why that's just dawning on me now, but it's like we never really got to see her react to the fact is like, oh my god, I'm a grandmother, And the fact is that, so like, that is her daughter-in-law, so for her, it almost, for Regina, it's like her family's extended because she now has a daughter. So it's like, no wonder she's like so cool with, Jacinda, because like, I love, because even under the curse, there's still aspects of who you were, but prior to the curse that still affect who you are. Like, for example, her being on motherly is just because no matter what happens, that side of her will never go away when it comes to Henry. So I thought that was I just love how that's so well done. And for her to respond to the text like that and show up instead. And I love the fact is when she shows up, Ivy's putting on lipstick. And it's just like, yeah, you thought you were meeting Henry? No, you're not. You're not going to play with his heart. You're not going to try and manipulate him. It's like legitimately, it does seem like she does have feelings for Henry, which later on we see that that's total BS. Because I'm going to go ahead and get right to it. I love the fact is that she's playing. Like, because like right after like, her mother tore her down again, and just like, oh, some daughters are like, basically, I guess in her mind, like, Anastasia is the one that's like, oh, she's the great daughter. I guess, maybe it's a combination of the fact that she lost her and everything, but, she kind of treats Ivy/Giselle like crap. But to find out, it's like, oh, actually, Giselle remembers everything. She's like, oh, don't call me Ivy. Call me Giselle. I'm like, what? You remember too? It's like, that's so good. Like I said, I figured out if anyone, it'd be maybe Rumple. But then obviously, like, we still don't really know whether he 100% remembers. But like last week's episode makes it seem like, oh, he remembers. But now you got Giselle. So it's like, how long has Giselle known about everything? Like, was it this lady here? Because it seems like they're working together. Because it's like, oh, your mom thinks she's running things, and in actuality, we're playing her. Because like Ivy's playing the victim, like, oh my god, she's like, I hate my mother. My mother's wrecking me. It's like, no, like she's playing the victim just to let her mom think she's still in control. It's like, that's so good. It's like, who is that lady that they're talking to? We still haven't gotten a name drop. It's like, who is she? And what's her purpose in all of this? I mean, I get it's sad because it's like, as in the past, like it's something I kind of like brought up early, like Giselle, like how she treated Tiana about the whole like, oh, having to sell stuff just to keep your kingdom afloat and stuff like that. But just how mean she was. But the fact of the matter is, we did see that side of her where it's like, oh no, man, everything like she has good in her. It's just like her mother's kind of warped her in a way. It's like now this basic question of, is that true, or is Ivy just evil to the core? Maybe it's just her mother years of being kind of like a stepping stone for her mom that just kind of warped her into the way she is. So her mom's very dexterous, and I guess that just made her just just as bad as her mom, if not maybe worse. I don't know. I think it's not worse, but sad, because you do see like there is a glimmer in her. But then again, everything with her and Henry is like, well, now that puts all that in question, because maybe there's no actual good in her. Maybe she's just manipulating. I mean, not she definitely is manipulating Henry. Which you had the whole Ronnie situation, like she still doesn't quite trust her, which goes back to what I brought up last episode. That's going to come back to bite Henry, because like you could tell, like, oh, they were looking at each other. Not was that last week's episode or week before? Episode before last. Either way, like when they were looking at each other, it's like, oh, there's something possibly there. It's like, I wish, because you know that's going to come back to mess things up. So hopefully Lucy can interfere, or a combination of Lucy and Ronnie bring that whole situation to, like, you know, not happening. Obviously, like, I'm keep beating around the bush. Obviously, I want to talk about the biggest thing in this episode being what Ronnie found. I saw her get a picture from, like, that room, but I wasn't sure what it was. And then lo and behold, it's a picture of her. But she's like, I don't know what this picture is. It's like, I would never wear that. She's like, what? That's not even me. And then it's just like, I don't even know who this little kid is. And Henry is like, oh, that's me. I'm like, what? I was like, that's so good. Because that's a picture of them from Storybrooke, like way back in the day. I'm like, that's so good. Like, because now we're starting to get the pieces rolling forward of like, okay, something's not right here. I mean, for one, you look exactly the same in this picture, but this is me back when I was a kid. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? Then it starts like, oh, maybe that's a little bit true to what, like, Lucy's been saying, that there's something going on. Like, it's like the pieces are there. I'm like, that's so good. Maybe they're going to start thinking it's fabric. I don't know. I'm so interested to find out what they do. Because at first I was, you know, before I recorded this, I was thinking like, I was like, I guess Giselle doesn't even know. But then I'm like, no, I'm so stupid. Of course she knows. She left it there specifically for her to find, because it's like, she set the whole thing up. She even told the lady to hide while Ronnie was down there. I wonder would she have done the same thing if it was Henry? I wonder which would actually make this better, because it was Ronnie who found it instead of Henry. I'm just curious. Did she actually, I don't know, like, I figured she was still going to try and, like, sweet talk and manipulate Henry still, because of the whole lipstick and everything. So it's not like she saw Ronnie coming, but she probably still would have been, or maybe she had a feeling. I mean, I don't know. Nevertheless, but it's like, I was like, no, that's got to be it. Like, she has to, like, that whole thing was on purpose, because she wants them to figure things out, because when they figure things out, it will undermine her mom's situation. Like her mom's big grand plan, which is like her ultimate goal, which is kind of interesting, because when you think about the fact that her mom's goal is to bring back her sister. But then again, it's like, you know, she's kind of got a little bit of mommy issues to a certain extent. So she probably hates her sister in the regard. It's like, oh, you're the one that was loved. And always, I mean, because to be fair, we have never really got to see like Victoria's relationship with her other daughter. So, I mean, we've seen it so far with Ivy/Giselle, but even then we've only seen a fraction of it. But I'm sure it's one of those situations. So it's because I've talked about it countless times. Like what Once Upon a Time does well is like, you go, okay, you kind of understand why Giselle became the way she is. I mean, you can already see it now just because of who Victoria is. But I think all that like accumulates to her just being like, nah, bump that. I mean, to be fair, Giselle gets something out of it too. Maybe the whole point is maybe she becomes queen, ruler, or whatever. You know, maybe she's kind of like Regina, where she wants her own happily ever after that's not tied to her mom. Either way, she's just willing to use and manipulate anyone. So the whole Henry situation and this whole Ronnie situation with the whole picture is probably like another step in that direction. Also, interesting thing, just kind of a little thing that happened in this episode, because Killian helped them get the truck, Jacinda and Sabine. I don't know why I do that. Like, I always find it interesting. I flip-flop a lot of times when I'm talking about characters, because it's like, because this isn't Tiana and Cinderella. This is Jacinda and Sabine. That's why it's like it's kind of like that weird thing where it's like David and Prince Charming. His is a weird case just because he was already David before becoming Prince Charming. Prince Charming is just the name Snow gave him. But like Snow, I would rarely ever call her Mary Margaret, just because like Snow is who she was. But if she was Mary Margaret again, I'd call her Mary. It's that whole little thing again. But nevertheless, I think it's like he helped them get that truck, because that truck they're going to use as food truck, he got it out of impound for them, and he helped figure out like, yeah, that whole fire thing wasn't an accident. So you see him and Tiana bonding, but immediately my brain goes like, what, I I mean, because to me, I thought that's where it was eventually might go, just because of the whole situation of like, oh, she's looking for someone. I mean, to be fair, like I said, Tiana's whole situation was like, I don't need a hero. I can be that hero myself. I can fill that role. Like it's there. It's always been there inside of me. I just had to take the opportunity to realize that's who I really am. So it's just kind of lived in my brain, like, oh, Tiana and Hook, maybe. Because once again, I mean, to be fair, we still don't know the whole mom situation, so there might be a true love situation there, but nevertheless. We also see, like, Hook diving a little deeper into the whole case of that missing girl being, like, I mean, which now ultimately goes, like, well, that's definitely connected to his daughter. Because before I brought it up, I was like, could that then potentially, like, I figured the whole Alice situation was a red herring, but it's like, this missing girl is actually his daughter. Because in her diary or journal of her, she drew, like, a window like it was inside of a wall, which kind of makes me think, like, someone was right about who potentially his daughter could be. And it's like, it seems more and more likely that it's this particular person. Once again, I won't really say who, just because it's like, oh, be spoilers. It's like, I don't know if I want to say it or not. Like, I'll go ahead and say it. It doesn't really matter. Rapunzel. It's like what someone recently put out there, like, oh, that she's actually Hook's daughter. I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. So it seems like that might be the case, especially with that wall drawn the way it was, like it was inside of a tower site. So yeah, it seems like we are definitely leaning towards a Rapunzel storyline in that regard, which is kind of interesting, thinking about Captain Hook being the father of Rapunzel. It's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, even in like Tangled, I don't think did they ever go over who I forgot. Yeah, her parents were still alive in that storyline. I forgot. She was just taken away from her parents when she was super young. That's what that whole thing was. But nevertheless, I'm very interested to see that storyline go down, especially because the guy that he was talking to in this episode, because like he had the same markings on his arm that were in the journal that Killian has been reading. That's from the missing girl. It also explains why he's so hell bent, like why, without him even realizing it, he's probably come across her in like the past. They probably actually met up in the past, you know, while they were in a different realm, like outside of the curse, but he just doesn't remember. So maybe that's kind of another reason, like his fatherly instincts are kicking in. You know, maybe I don't know. It's what I was trying to say is like maybe like whether he knows of his father instincts, whether it's like he met her in the past or he never actually got to meet her, that some part of him is driving him closer to be like, hey, you need to find your daughter, you know? So, but whoever it is that has her is keeping her hidden now, whether that's connected to Victoria or whether that's a whole plot all on its own, we'll just kind of have to wait and see. So, like I said, fantastic episode. I'm super excited to see what goes down next episode, especially with that Ronnie and Henry situation with that photo. I was like, that's so good. I love that. Was such a good surprise and such a good like twist. I'm like, dude, you're just that much closer to remembering who you really are. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.